Hey guys, welcome to the video. Salt here. Today we're going to be going over the Archgun the Mausolon. But before we start, let's go over our commenter board. The first commenter of the last video was Silver44, and the top commenter of the last video was user-TF9GR8HN6I. We have our recent channel supporters here of Elite Reverser, Whoop-De-Wham, and Nice Bear. Thank you so much for your support. Unique and interesting things about the Mausolon is that it has two different firing modes. Its primary fire mode is a machine gun with explosive rounds, and they explode in a 1.8 meter area. It has innate heat, and damaging lifted enemies grants up to 13 more instances of direct damage. And now its alternate fire, this works similarly to the other Deimos weapons where you have to get 5 kills. It's going to charge a little bar up, and then it'll allow you to alternate fire once, and then that bar will go back down to 0, and then you have to get 5 more kills. So for every 5 kills, you're able to alternate fire once. And now the alternate fire also has innate heat, and this is going to be like an explosive railgun with an 8 meter explosive area. And this causes the lifted status on enemies. Before we go over the build, I just wanted to go over two setups that are very close to each other for being the best setup for the weapon. And that's going to be the one that I have here today that I'm going to be showcasing. And the difference is that this one has secondary enervate on its secondary arcane and primed rubedo lined barrel for flat damage. This gives us about 200% flat damage here. And the other one, the differences are it has Cascadia Flare as its secondary arcane, and it uses parallax scope over primed rubedo lined barrel. Now, the differences between these two is that the one I'm showcasing today with secondary enervate is going to be more average critical chance, actually a lot more average critical chance than the flare setup with parallax scope. And that's because enervate lets us sit mostly at yellows and orange crits, whereas the parallax scope flare setup gives you 78% critical chance, which means that 22% of the time you're doing white non-crits, which don't get any value from your critical damage, which does kind of suck. Now there is positives to using flare and parallax scope, and that's another about 280% flat damage. 280% flat damage is pretty nice, but on the enervate rubedo line barrel build, we already have almost 200% flat damage here, so another 280 is not really that big of a deal. I would rather have more average critical chance than just some more flat damage. Now, sometimes the differences between these builds and what one I think is better may change with a Riven, because if you get a Riven with critical chance and you're able to get your average critical chance instead of 78% with parallax scope and flare to be over 100%, then you really do have to consider that maybe flare and parallax scope would actually finally beat out enervate and prime rubedo line barrel. But that's using a Riven, that's like external sources. That's just something to consider if you have a Riven with critical chance. Without it, this is going to be the best setup. All right, enough yapping. Let's finally go over the build. We have primed rubedo line barrel for 187% flat damage. On a lot of art guns, we'll use both primed rubedo line barrel and primed deadly efficiency. But on this weapon, primed deadly efficiency is not very good. So primed deadly efficiency is 220 flat damage for 17 seconds when we reload from empty. But if you look at the Mausolon's magazine, it's 300, and we have a crux build, which means that we have a lot of ammo efficiency. So it takes an incredibly long time to go through a magazine. So primed deadly efficiency doesn't really give us any value at all. So it stays off of the build for the Mausolon. So now we have primed dual rounds for 110% multi-shot. Automatic trigger for plus 60% fire rate, hollowed bullets for plus 80% critical damage, critical focus for plus 60% critical chance and damage when aiming. In the next 2 mod slots, we're going to be making viral. So we have the 60/60 toxic mod of contamination casing and the 60/60 cold mod of hypothermic shell to make viral. Now, if you have an external way to make viral already, then instead make corrosive here, which would be the 60/60 toxic and the 60/60 electric mod. In the last mod slot, we have combustion rounds, which is the big 120% heat. We use this to help overweight our heat. It helps that this weapon has innate heat, because the innate heat plus combustion rounds actually finally lets us overweight the heat. Where on a lot of the other art guns, it barely overweights or it's equal to viral, which kind of sucks. But on this weapon, you don't have that issue. Heat is easily overweighted with just combustion rounds. In the arcane slots, in the primary arcane slot, we're using primary crux. This is going to give us 300% status chance and 60% ammo efficiency. Both of those things are really good. The status chance is really good for a viral heat build because we get a lot more heat procs out of it. And the ammo efficiency is just good in general if you're using it as a heavy weapon. As Necromech or Archwing, you don't really have to worry because you have unlimited ammo, but as a heavy weapon, the ammo efficiency is great. In the secondary arcane slot, we have secondary Enervate. This is going to deal with all of our critical chance for us. We don't need any kind of critical chance mods on the build. This is on a hit, increases our critical chance by 10% and resets after 6 big critical hits, which they consider as orange crits. This is how you build out the Archgun the Mausolon. I hope you guys liked it, and if you did, consider leaving a like and subscribing for future content. So now we'll have a 5-minute gameplay portion showcasing the weapon, and when that's done, we'll come back to the Orbiter and we'll give it its final score and rank. So I'll see you guys again after the gameplay. Alrighty, we're about to start this 5-minute gameplay portion up here. We got the Mausolon. Let's go ahead and hack the terminal and get into it. I have Proteus Dispensary on my build just to make sure I'm topped off on heavy ammo. That way I can give you guys a good showcase. But I'm going to try not to use it just because this weapon is extremely ammo efficient. I've already done my 10-minute kill tests, and on my kill tests, I had to like use it one time maybe in each run, and it was questionable whether I even needed to use it there. I just kind of like did it anyway. So I'm gonna see if I can get through these 5 minutes without even using it, which is rare. You know, a lot of the Archguns we've done have, even with Crux, have still eventually run out of ammo pretty fast. The only ones that I've considered being very ammo efficient were the beam weapons, the Larkspur and the Cortege. Because beam weapons, both of those builds use Crux and they are beam weapons, so they use 0.5 ammo per shot. So, you know, both of those things make them very ammo efficient. This one is a Crux build, but it's not a beam weapon, so it's using a full 1 ammo per shot. But it's still incredibly ammo efficient, which is really cool. Now, the alternate fire on this weapon, you want to be very careful with, because there is a bit of a delay before it lets you primary fire again. So you don't just want to be alternate firing willy-nilly. You want to make sure you actually have a big pack of enemies in front of you. And like right here, maybe? That's pretty good alternate fire right there. Because you get value out of it then. You know, if you have to wait to shoot your primary fire, it's not that big of a deal because you just killed the whole pack of enemies. Where if you're only shooting it at 1 or 2 enemies, you might as well just primary fire at them. You'll probably increase your DPS by just primary firing on small packs. Like right there, I probably shouldn't have alternate fired at just those 2 enemies. But that's a little bit min-maxy. You could probably use this however you want. The alternate fire does really good damage versus the Acolyte though. So when the Acolyte comes out, you definitely want to alternate fire into him. This weapon, like it's got the big 8-meter AoE radius, but the actual projectile that comes out, like before it explodes, is very narrow. It doesn't have like a wide hitbox, so you do kind of want to be like perfect on your aim by hitting the Acolyte. So missing with it versus the Acolyte is going to kind of hurt. It's going to feel really bad. The actual damage of the primary versus the Acolyte it's okay. It's okay damage versus the Acolyte, but you definitely want to try to alternate fire though. The alternate fire I would say is S tier damage versus the Acolyte, whereas the primary fire is more of like high B, low A maybe. Oh, this thing also has that weird thing where it does more damage instances to lifted enemies. I didn't even know this did that. I was checking the wiki today because I was like, you know, let me write down, let me make sure I'm not missing any weird interactions on this weapon. So I always check the wiki beforehand just to make sure I didn't miss any like weird interactions. And it had that like 13 more instances of direct damage versus lifted enemies. I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. So I wrote down, let me get my little notebook here. I wrote down different ways you can get the lifted status because it's not super easy. It's kind of actually a rare status. There's a lot of CC abilities in the game that look like they're lifting enemies, but they're not. So I'm gonna try to do the gameplay and read off my little notebook here. So Bone Widow, the Necromech, has 2 different abilities that cause the lifted status. Sevagoth has 1 ability that causes the lifted status. I probably should have wrote down what ability that was, but yeah, he has 1 ability that causes the lifted status. The Crescent Vulpaphyla has a mod that lets him cause the lifted status. Again, I probably should have wrote down the exact mod that it was, but yeah, it's the Crescent Vulpaphyla. Most melee heavy attacks and melee heavy slams will cause a lifted status, which I don't think you can. Yeah, I can't whip out my melee with this. Can I slam? I can't slam with an arc gun either. So yeah, that's something you don't really, you can't really do with an arc gun. And then Naramon's Void Levitation causes the lifted status. So just keep those things in mind. All right, let me get 5 kills here and we'll show you what this does versus the Acolyte. There we go, okay. I want to actually hit him. Boom, look at that, 1 shot. 1 shot, really, really good damage versus the Acolyte. If you miss though, you're gonna feel bad about it because you gotta get 5 more kills to charge it up. So, all right, let's get this last Thrax down. Is he in ghost mode? I think he is. Okay, so 5 minutes. What are we at here? 454 kills. I was also kind of messing about, so I probably could have got a better kill per minute score, but that's okay. So we'll head back to the Orbiter now. Welcome back to the Orbiter, guys. So let's go over how the Mausolon did in its 3 10-minute runs on Steel Path Lewis Circulus. It got 1,126, 1,060, and 1,094 kills, putting it easily in the S tier for kill per minute potential. When it comes to single target damage, there's a few different stories here, and it's because it has the primary and the alternate fire, and specifically the primary fire does different levels of damage versus normal thick enemies than it does versus the Acolyte. So let's start with the primary fire, just the machine gun mode that has the explosive bullets. Versus normal thick enemies like Thraxes and Eximuses, it's really good. You stack a lot of heat procs, it's heavily heat weighted, it does really good. I would say it's easily A tier damage versus those normal thick enemies. Now versus the Acolyte or other kind of mini bosses where the game doesn't allow you to stack statuses past a certain amount, 4 statuses for instance versus the Acolyte, you don't get the full value out of the weapon, or at least our build, because you're not going to be stacking heat procs, or you can only stack up to 4 of them. So versus the Acolyte, I would say the primary fire is more B tier damage. It's still decent, but it's not in the A tier. It's B tier damage versus the Acolyte, where it's A tier damage versus normal thick enemies. Now we go to the alternate fire, and the alternate fire is that, you know, huge doomsday cannon where it just one-shots starting Steel Path Acolytes. It'll pretty much one-shot Thraxes and Eximuses. It's really good, so it should be S tier. But, you know, it's the same thing with the Cortege. The Cortege was another weapon that had an alternate fire that, like, does S tier damage. They're both Deimos weapons. They both have this, you know, kill 5 enemies, then you're able to alternate fire once, and then you have to kill 5 more enemies and you can alternate fire once. Well, if you don't hit that enemy perfectly and you don't one-shot him, you know, now you have to get 5 more kills, or now you have to switch to the primary fire, or if you miss completely, then it really hurts. You know, then you've just wasted that whole time shooting at the Acolyte there. So it has the potential to do S tier damage. You know, if you chest hit or head hit the Acolyte, it's gonna, you know, kill him in 1 hit. It has the potential, but the actual usability on that damage, sometimes you're not always going to play perfectly. And so just like the Cortege, I think we'll give it A tier. I think on average, it's probably going to hit, you know, be about A tier, how you're going to feel like it does against enemies, just because sometimes it'll feel S, and then sometimes you're going to miss, or you're not going to hit perfectly, and it's going to feel like B or C. And so I think we'll give it A tier for single target. All right, enough about single target, enough about that. Let's go to ease of use now. Pretty easy weapon to use. You do have a crux build, which means you want to hit weak points. You are using that one mod, I can never remember what it's called, critical focus, I think, that makes you aim in. So you do have those 2 things where you have to aim in. You do have to kind of like hit weak points here and there. The explosive radius on the primary fire is not huge. It's only 1.8, so you can't just like dumbly shoot this like you can some other weapons that have bigger AoEs. You actually have to kind of aim somewhat decently. And for that reason, I think we'll just give it right in the middle at B tier. So that's my take on the weapon. Tell me what you guys think. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have an amazing day. All right, bye.